Welcome to the Most Dangerous Device radio show, where we discuss free energy and over-unity devices and their impact on society. This week's guest is Randy Powell, the senior researcher of the Vortex-Based mathematics project. Randy expanded on the work of Marco Rodin, integrating it into a type of mathematics that can create what is known as the ABHA Torus. The ABHA Torus is claimed by Mr. Powell to be the perfect torus, which has the unusual ability to reveal in 3D space any and all mathematical, geometric relationships possible. This is because the ABHA Torus provides a mathematical framework where the true secrets of numbers, qualitative relationships based on angle and ratio, are revealed in fullness. Randy has been invited to this radio program because this mathematics has proven to be a key element in the creation of electrical coils that exhibit over-unity phenomena. Welcome today, Randy Powell, to the Most Dangerous Device. Well, thank you so much for taking the time for this interview.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Glad to do it.
Honestly, I don't know much about you except that I saw some videos that were very interesting. And I know about Marco Rodin's work. Mm-hmm. And I also watched, quite a bit of your presentation on the ABHA Kingdom, the videos that you have up there. Mm-hmm. Quite frankly, I believe most of it is above my head, but I do see the beauty in the math. The reason you are asked to be on this radio show, however, is from a video that I saw of someone who made a rodent-type coil, or it could have been an ABHA coil, and I'm not really sure the difference between the two, and we can discuss that in just a minute. But I saw a video of a round magnet sitting in a glass cup that was spinning from the Rodent Coil, or from the coil underneath it, and then they disconnected the power to the coil and then brought the glass container away from the coil and up to 8 to 10 feet, what appeared to be 8 to 10 feet away from the coil. The magnet was still spinning full force and it did not appear to be slowing down. So that got me intrigued. I started researching you and your work, and I thought, this guy needs to be on the Most Dangerous Device radio show. So that's why you're here.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, that video that you're referring to was work done by a really talented gentleman named Jack Scholes, who's based out of Hawaii, and he's sort of had a lifelong interest and work in the electronics field. And so he took up some of these ideas as a hobby, and he made the original versions of what is mostly called the ABHA coil. Some people refer to it as the Powell Coil, which is based on the new discoveries in vortex math that I made several years back when I posted up my original videos that are online explaining the solution that I developed for making these mathematical toruses or donuts in 3D so that they could be modeled correctly. And so Jack made one of the first approximate versions of that design, and that was one of the first things that happened when he did it, just messing around with the neodymium magnet. So he charges it for a few seconds and then removes the power, and you can clearly see not only does it continue going for minutes, but it speeds up very distinctly at a certain point. And
wow.
So a lot of developments of variations of these coils. Daniel Nunez has done a lot of great work doing applications with lighting that, it's all bedroom, workshop stuff, and none of us have the money to travel and really see each other very much. So we kind of do all this by communicating over the phone. It's a slow and difficult process, but their work is proving that the current understanding of electromagnetism and how it relates to energy production is at best highly flawed. I mean, because nobody could predict the results that we're getting.
Well, as a matter of fact, Daniel was the last person I interviewed on the Most Dangerous Device.
Oh, really? Okay.
I just interviewed him last week, And by the time your and my interview goes public, his interview will already be up there. So,
well, that's great. I'm glad you did that. I look forward to hearing. Well, Daniel is an extremely talented individual, and he and I have a very good ability to communicate, and he's done the most to really show the effectiveness of the designs that I was promoting. So I owe him a big debt in that, because he's making my ideas a reality. And, you know, I just want to support and help him to get to the place where he can do it on a real level with funding.
Could you explain to me what the difference is between the coil that you have designed, which as I understand it is based on the Rodent Coil? What's the difference between Marco Rodin's coil and your coil?
Well, originally, for people who, I don't know how much background is going to be in Daniel's interview, but for people who aren't familiar with it, Marco Rodin is the original discoverer of vortex-based mathematics. I believe Marco's now 56. I just talked to him earlier tonight, and he originally made this discovery when he was 15 or 16, so it's been going on for about 40 years. He came up with this equation based on a decryption of what's called the most great name of God out of the Baha'i faith. He just started messing with the mathematics in this equation and just noticed that there were some highly significant, completely unnoticed regularities in our normal counting system. And he knew that they were beyond just that kind of coherence can't be coincidental. So he proceeded to just take it out there and meet with all kinds of scientists and researchers and people. And over the years, people developed various notions about it. And it was actually a gentleman named Scott Gosler, who I believe was an electrical engineer, who first suggested that these numbers were modeling a coil, and that we were modeling some type of a conductor, and that the numbers were also showing a field, associated magnetic, or what we call a flux field. So at that suggestion, Marco then took his math and he made an application based on his interpretation of math that was called the Rodent Coil, which is a bifiliar coil, meaning it has two separate circuits with a gap space in between, and it wraps around multiple times, crossing at various points at right angles, which by conventional electrical engineering would strengthen fields. So what happened is many, many years later, when I came around, I was just sort of working on this math due to a series of profound synchronicities that had happened in my life that had led me on the path towards studying this. And those are things that I talk about in the personal history videos that I have up on YouTube, which have been up there for years. In fact, I think we even did those. As I say that, it's 11:11 right here. We did those, the very night that I recorded those videos was the night that I made the major mathematical breakthrough. And so even at the time, I still wasn't 100% sure where this was all leading me. And it was that night that I realized that the previously understood solution to what's called the Rodent Torus, or the ABHA Torus, was incorrect. And that I actually found a way, without even having to have a 3D model, to be able to calculate along any axis on the torus and know where every single other number was. And models were eventually made of that, which mostly were done by Tom Barnett in England. All the ones that are seen in my TED Talk proved that what I was saying about the mathematics was true. I put that challenge out there 4 years ago or more, and no one has ever been able to offer any alternative or to show any evidence that that solution doesn't still hold as being absolutely correct. So the next logical step for me was to apply that solution to this idea of electrical coils, which is just one idea within this. And it's still being done at a very primitive level. Ultimately, we'd like to see it applied to hot fusion and being able to harness what's called toroidal pinch, which is just basically a way to create a hot spot and control and regulate the temperature. And that's what this geometry of the torus that we discovered in the math is really all about.
What got you interested in this stuff? I mean, this is really out there kind of math. Are you an electrical engineer by trade? I mean, what do you do for a living?
Not at all. Actually, I'm my background, as far as schooling is more in philosophy and religion. Originally, I went to school for music, but I was doing classical music, and I didn't really jive with the very formal classical scene. It was just too uptight for me. I didn't fit in there, so I decided to pursue philosophy and religion, which is what I studied through school and into grad school. Went to UVA.
Well, we have a lot in common then, actually, because I've been in music all my life. I started playing when I was 4 years old, and I have a communications electrical background because I was an engineer, or am an engineer, audio engineer. So that's very interesting. And, of course, I teach A Course in Miracles every week, which I have taught since 2006 and recorded them since 2007. So I have a weekly teaching spiritual podcast also. I don't know if you know much about A Course in Miracles, but it basically teaches oneness. There's only one of us here. That's right. Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah, and from what I understand of your spiritual background, that's a similar type of thought system.
Sure. I mean, well, I went through lots of different things. I guess there's a detailed version of the very intricate aspects of the synchronicities that to me show that something that, if you're simply going to discredit it at the level of detail that I was able to kind of retain and maintain about it, I think that you have to be ignoring what's being presented to you as some kind of incredible evidence. But to tell the very short version of the story, basically my story started when I was really young, that my father passed away when I was 2.5. So I kind of grew up with this absent figure or this sense of the spirit or a spiritual being or maybe the other side or something like that. I don't mean in any kind of supernatural way. I just mean it was a part of my everyday reality and consciousness in terms of what I was thinking about. I was very interested in death and what that meant at a really young age. I was probably around 4 or 5. I really got hooked on this thought about what a human soul looked like, because I knew that it didn't look like our human body, which I just could see at that time was some kind of a pod or a container for something else that we didn't see that was living in our bodies, which was our soul, our spirit. I'm sure I picked up on a lot of those ideas at church and whatnot with my family. I started really thinking about that because I wanted to know, if I died, how would I identify my father in heaven, not my heavenly father, but, my biological father? How would I be able to tell him apart from anything else? It was maybe in the next several days that I can't remember if I was at a hospital, at a veterinary office, but I saw the symbol of the caduceus, which is the 2 serpents, the medical symbol, or sometimes it's called,
right,
the entwined serpents with the wings outspread at the top. As soon as I saw that image, I immediately identified that as the solution to my riddle. And it made sense to me that it was on a hospital door because that was where those souls were being removed.
How was that a solution to your riddle?
Because I believed that, I was, 4 or 5 years old. I didn't probably have to go through a rigorous argument with myself. But when I saw that image, I identified it as the image of a human soul. Well, where it got interesting to me was at the time I was a kid, that was just my thing, and I would think about it. And then I had this experience once when I was in church where I was imagining this caduceus inside of my body. I was trying to figure out where it was, where it lived, and I saw that it was near the base of my spine. I just had this imagination of this caduceus sort of resting at the base of my spine. And I started thinking about what would happen when I died, and I imagined these serpents winding their way up my spine and the wings opening inside of my head and flying out of the top of my head and going to heaven, where they landed on cloud 9, which I always say I remember getting from the show Bewitched, which I was on when I was a kid. I used to watch a lot, and they used to always go to cloud 9 when they went to the spirit world.
Right. You say you were on Bewitched?
No, I was just watching the show.
Oh, yeah.
So at that time, when I had that image of leaving my body in that form and going into heaven in this bright place and landing on cloud 9, and I wondered, what did the souls do here? And I saw that they looked into this light, and I looked into the light, and I had this indescribable, it was like experiencing all of eternity in one single flash, or everything all at once, just this overwhelming kind of mystical shock. It just shocked me right back into my body, and it scared the crap out of me. I really tried to stay away from thinking about that for a while, but it remained in my head. And most of my, I'm not trying to make it out like my whole life was some kind of mystical journey or whatever. I guess it is in some senses, but it's regular life in a lot of ways. But when I became a teenager and I started taking up a big interest in shamanism and in various world religion and trying to, I read all the Western philosophy and all that, and I really came to the conclusion pretty early on that analysis is incapable of direct knowledge of reality because it's divisive by its very nature.
Well, I've always believed that analysis is nothing more than judgment, and judgment could never truly know anything because it's always one step away from truth.
Yeah, I mean, it has its purposes in the human world, but analysis can't get you to an understanding.
Yeah, the only way to know something is to be it.
Yeah. So if analysis is part of your process of experiencing something, then it can be useful. But it can never capture the whole. And I realized that language was just circular, and there was this recursive quality to it all that I needed somehow to break through. And so I started seeking out meditation and things like that. And that's where I really had this shock, because I started reading this book on yoga, and they were showing this image of what the Kundalini as this caduceus symbol that sat at the base of the spine, and that they believed at death that these Kundalini would awaken and go up the spine and leave through the crown chakra at the top of the head. And it hit me like a ton of bricks that I experienced this as a kid. I know that I had absolutely zero exposure to anything to do with yoga in my middle-class Methodist upbringing in the suburbs in Virginia at that time when I was that young. So I was just shocked. I mean, became to me ultimate convincer when I saw that there really is this collective consciousness. And, I was really into things like Carl Jung, and I really saw that. I experienced that synchronicity. So it just made me start paying a lot more attention. And I felt like that there was some knowledge inherent in all that. So, the videos I have online tell about how I was led through a series of miraculous kinds of synchronicities that just guided me from one step to another, where I was able to ask specific questions and receive very specific answers. Where it kind of dovetails, as we had spoken earlier, and I was familiar with your work with David Wilcock, my journey through all the different meditations and mysticisms, eventually I got interested in a trail of knowledge that I knew. I was highly impressed with, obviously, everything going on in Egypt. And I knew that the Greeks in many ways had preserved a lot of that knowledge from studying Plato and Socrates and Aristotle and just looking at what was going on at that time, those classical philosophers. And I felt like they were really onto found knowledge. And I also saw the same kind of numerology or, number worship, the Pythagorean mysticism, which held the number 9 in high esteem. And when their civilization collapsed, all that knowledge was preserved in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. Because they were having their Renaissance while Europe was in the Dark Ages. So the Middle Eastern philosophers preserved all that knowledge, and it became part of their mystery schools. And you can really see it coming out. So I started pursuing and becoming interested in a lot of the Eastern Islamic mysticism and studied with a lot of Sufi teachers and began to become really highly interested in the intonation of the names of God, and the idea being that somehow the sound itself, by correctly intonating a sound, you could produce a certain quality, be it light or love or any of the names of God, power, majesty, whatever it was that you needed, you could call upon that name and you could manifest that quality. And I, after years of really delving into this, I had several profound experiences, including a physical healing that I witnessed with my own eyes that really got me deeper into the fact that there was something real here with this connection of these sacred sounds. And in that Islamic tradition, there's a apocrypha, I guess you could say, and there's a legend that there's something called the most great name of God that was encrypted in the Quran and was supposed to be held until the end of time. If you found the most great name of God and you could properly intonate it, that it would contain all the other names of God within it. It would be like the mother tone or the skeleton key of divine knowledge and power. It would put you in perfect resonance with all coherent intelligence in the universe.
Well, then excuse me for not seeing the connection. So I'm just going to ask the question that I think many people listening to this show may want to know. And that is, how did you go from that to this mathematics, this Vortex-Based math?
Well, it turned out I didn't even have to find the most great name because it was revealed by a prophet out of Iran about 150 years ago named Baha'u'llah. He was the founder of the Baha'i faith, which Marco is a member of. And Baha'u'llah, his whole message, he wrote something like 15,000 epistles revealed that were written down by scribes. And his whole thing is predominantly the most great name of God, which is called Baha, which means glory, light, or splendor. In the superlative case, it's called ABHA, which is supposed to be the spiritual world within this world. So Marco found that name. He was interested in the same thing I was, just from a different path. And he decrypted that name. And in the scriptures, Baha'u'llah says that it equals 9. And he talks very detailed. I know people say, I found something in an old scripture, but these scriptures are very specific. He specifically says in scriptures that if you tapped into this hidden energy of the number 9 that's encrypted in this most great name, that it would be the key to all sciences, that you would be able to produce an energy which required no fuel and produced no fumes. On and on and on about the eternal youth, the endless possibilities inherent within this mother tone. So I became really interested and really deep in the practice of intonating that most great name. And during a lot of these processes, that's when certain I've never really done anything like channeling or any kind of had anything like that, but I did have this one experience. I've had a lot of profound mystical experiences. I just don't see them in that way, or I don't have some kind of a source that I'm communicating with other than just, I guess, the higher self. But I did have this one experience one night, which was witnessed by several people, in which I did have some kind of a communication with the spirit or some kind of information source. And it basically revealed to me a very specific story, which I proceeded to tell to all the people who were sitting there. And it was very uncharacteristic of me, so a lot of them paid attention to it. But I wasn't in any kind of trance. I was perfectly conscious in a lucid state and just speaking what was in my mind. And, I detail it much more in the videos, but the essence of that story has to do with connections with ancient Egypt and the construction of the pyramids. And I don't get too heavy into the reincarnation thing. I kind of look at it as if it's all holographic, so that we are all just one being. We all contain each other within us. And so we don't really necessarily have to have reincarnation in the traditional sense. We're all reincarnations of each other. But whatever it may be, I tapped into this certain frame of information. And in the course of that, I was barely familiar of David Wilcock at the time. I had the specific issue where, I'll just finish the story first. Basically what happened is I revealed this whole story about how I had been a part of the construction of the pyramids, and that there was these two twin spirits one of which was supposed to be me. And the other one, all I knew about him at the time was that in his previous incarnation, he had been Edgar Cayce. And
wow, I had no idea this is where this interview was going to go. This is pretty cool. Go ahead.
And again, I'm a person who's been very resistant my whole life to anything kind of New Age. Not that I'm not open to all possibilities, but I tend to approach things with an open-minded kind of skepticism. So even when I have these experiences, it takes me a while to process it and really come to terms with how I understand it. But the fact of the matter is, I told this story, and the story was about how these two spirits were reincarnating on the planet over and over again, trying to push humanity along up to this point where this ancient knowledge was then going to be re-revealed. And that one of them was myself, and the other one was Mr. Wilcock.
Well, I have to ask you, does David know this? Because I don't even think he knows about you.
I don't even think he has any idea who I am, but you're really going to like where this story ends.
I'm just laughing now because I had no idea this is where this was going.
So the story was very detailed. I laid out a lot of things in there. And at the time, I knew who Edgar Cayce was because I'm from Richmond, Virginia. And my godfather used to always talk to me about Edgar Cayce. He was really into him and used to go to the museum in Virginia. But other than that, I really knew nothing about it. I've never read any of the Cayce readings. I knew really nothing about it other than just sort of general stories. This all just sort of dropped in my lap as I was having these synchronicities and being guided towards this information. And I had, of course, no idea at that time that I'd be now sitting here as the sort of at the forefront of this mathematics and everything that's going on. So it's been pretty mind-blowing watching the things that I said back then unfolding in front of my eyes right now. But many things happened that night. Anyway, people can watch the videos. I won't belabor the point. But where it led was that the next day I was really at kind of a crisis point because I wasn't sure if I was just completely losing my mind and going to lose my friends and family and whatnot due to trailing off into some kind of crazy fantasy world. And so I was really looking for something that was going to give me some kind of profound reassurance that I really needed. And so I asked a prayer that was very specific. Now, I grew up in a neighborhood in Midlothian, Virginia, and the name of the neighborhood is Stonehenge.
Oh, God. Wow.
Very dry and had 3 big boulders in front of my house that I used to sit on and play with as a kid. It was the only house that had that on the street. Big fake Stonehenge out in the front. It's still there. But anyway, I asked, this is what I wanted to know, 2 things. If I was to believe that this was real and true, I wanted to know, number 1, why did I grow up in Stonehenge? And number 2, who was I when Edgar Cayce was alive? Because if these 2 spirits keep reincarnating over and over, or I should say before this, what I had done is gone and found in the Cayce readings the exact same story that I told all those people that I had no idea would be in the Cayce readings. And it says that there are these 2 spirits, and then, you know, one of them was, I guess, Hermes or Thoth, and he was the designer of the pyramid, and the other one was, I guess, called Ra, and they reincarnated over and over, and Cayce goes into some of the different incarnations, Hermes being connected with sort of the Enoch character, too, which tied in a lot, because when I was studying Islam, my name that I had chosen was Idris, which is the same as Enoch in Arabic. There was just a lot of weird connections there that I go into a lot of detail about, and the caduceus was supposed to be his symbol, and on and on and on. Ultimately, I asked this question, why was I born in Stonehenge, and who was I when Edgar Cayce was alive? Because I couldn't think of anyone that particularly popped into my head from that era that would somehow parallel Cayce. And within a minute, I get this news story. The title of it was American Stonehenge. And I clicked on it. I'd never heard about this before. And it was about Edward Leedskalnin, who you may be familiar with, who built the Coral Castle down in Florida.
Yes, I've been there. Matter of fact, David and I went to Coral Castle when we had our conference in Miami last year. We spent a day at Coral Castle and had a wonderful time. It's really an amazing place.
Yeah, I can't wait to visit there myself. I haven't been able to go, but Edward Leedskalnin claimed to know the secrets of the pyramids, right? So here's a guy at the same exact time that Edgar Cayce was alive who claimed to know the secrets of the pyramids and built this crazy structure down in Florida. And when I saw it and saw his picture, something hit me that was deeper than any kind of, it was just such a deep, profound feeling. And anybody who really knows me knows that his whole presentation, it's totally my style. I've never felt that way about something, but like to look at something like that and just say, that is my style. That's how I would do it.
Mm-hmm.
Asking that question and seeing those two things brought together in this person, along with a variety of other things, really reinforced the story. So I've been carrying this around for years, and it led into many other things, eventually into this mathematics, and eventually into me making discoveries that revolutionized the mathematics, and various prophecies that had come through several years ago at that time that are all being confirmed, and all the same people are aligning. But here's the really funny part of the story that you'll like, is that last year when I was working with a friend out in LA, we were developing some prototypes of these coils and got a little bit of support so I could travel back and forth and work with this guy out in LA. And I own a raw food restaurant here in Charlotte with my wife called Luna's Living Kitchen. And we sort of pioneered a lot of that movement here. So I was trying to get the guy I was working with. He was changing his diet up, and I was talking to him a lot about his diet and fitness and whatnot. And so we decided to go eat at this raw food place in LA. For some reason, we kept getting delayed. Every night I wanted to go there, we just kept getting delayed for like 3 or 4 nights. And then finally, last night, we finally just determined we were going to go. So we went down to this place, and we go in there, and I sit down at the table, and I look straight up, and I'm looking right into David's face sitting there at the table. He was sitting at another table across with several other people. It just really struck me that this alignment was really there. And everyone always asks if I say anything to him, but I didn't, because I wanted to see it come from somewhere else. And I feel like that's probably what's happening right now.
You mean my contacting you?
Yeah.
It feels right. I had no idea of the connection. I knew I was guided to call you, and I knew there was a connection. I'm just glad that we're talking right now, but this is a complete surprise to me. David's going to be very surprised to find out this connection too. I love these synchronicities.
Well, I have to tell you, it's very interesting to me. David and I agree on a lot of things. I've been reading his book, and I really support the majority of what he's bringing forward scientifically. And I think we'd have great discussions about the parts that maybe feel aren't exactly interested. But to me, all of this is open-ended research. The universe is open-ended. We're all just seeking towards creating and emulating that higher perfection. I believe that this round that we're in right now is probably the most complex and difficult that we've ever really faced because of the situation on the planet. In some ways, I think we've forgotten ourselves more than ever. And in other ways, those powerful traces are really starting to reemerge as to who and what we all really are. And it's not just me or him, it's everybody.
Yeah, there's only one of us here, and we're experiencing ourselves subjectively. But let's get back to the math and the coil and practical applications as far as energy generation, because that is exactly what this show is about. You may or may not know the Most Dangerous Device radio show is about free energy or over unity devices. The reason it's called the Most Dangerous Device is because the discovery of a device that produces more energy out than in would be very upsetting to the powers that be in the current energy structure of the planet. So it's sort of a tongue-in-cheek kind of fun way to look at it. So do you have or have you seen a device, a coil, we'll call it a coil, configured using your mathematics that produces more energy out than it consumes?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, would you please elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, Daniel's got tons of videos up on YouTube where he's showing just that. People have to understand the significance of what they're looking at in a lot of those videos, because all they see is some LEDs getting lit up and they don't really understand what it means. But I've sat with many, many PhD physicists, electrical engineers, even Brooks Agnew, who's a friend of mine, and they'll tell you what he's showing is impossible. By all standard electrical engineering, the ABHA coil, as Daniel's put it together, should be nothing more than an extension cord. If anything, it should lose energy. There's no core to it. It doesn't have all these turns. It's not composed in any way, shape, or form as an electrical coil that anyone would think would work. Just as an example that he shows on one of his later videos, take a 12-volt battery and you hook it up straight up to some LED lights, and you can light about 8 LEDs with it. If you take that 12-volt battery and connect it to the coil and connect it to the lights, you can light 98 LEDs.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a huge payoff. I say this with total humility and respect for Daniel's work and everything that he's been able to accomplish. This is all so primitive. It's just simply to show that the concept works. There's something there that is, I'm not saying that I understand this energy fully. I understand certain aspects about it, but there is something there that is not accounted for by anything in Maxwell's equations or anything after that.
I want to share something with you that may or may not make it to the finished product, but I just have to say this. I know intuitively that this coil can produce infinite energy. I already know that. I cannot prove it, but I know it inside. I also know inside that if the frequency is high enough and the coil is made to the right specification, it can power itself forever.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what it is. It's the source of the non-decaying spin of the electron. The electron's been going around the nucleus of the atom, supposedly near the speed of light. Big Bang. It's not slowing down. That energy's coming from somewhere. And that's what we've been able to tap into and model with this math. You know, there's a lot of different names for it and ways to look at it, but ultimately it is the word. It is the source. It's resonance.
Exactly.
Vibration. It's what makes matter go.
Exactly. And nobody has been able to explain why the electron keeps spinning around the nucleus of an atom, even though trillions of electrons have been spinning since the beginning of time, and they are not slowing down. So that tells me that there must be some source of energy that we are not aware of that continuously rejuvenates or keeps these atoms spinning. And that's what I believe this coil is tapping into.
It is. It's the philosopher's stone, you know. It is the Ouroboros. It's
right.
The shape for energy transformation. And I believe that what you're saying is correct. I believe that with the proper public open project that we could create and fund through the public and have a complete open source of information about this, that we could absolutely change the world forever, because these coils haven't been made anywhere near to the specifications that I would really put on it and the computer modeling that I would do with the more advanced side of the math that I've been working with now. Because even my videos were years ago. I mean, there's been so many things that have happened since then in terms of discoveries made in all aspects, be it artificial intelligence or energy or DNA.
One of the things that came to my mind when I found out about your coil, and this is just intuition, I have no idea if it's true or not, but I'm going to share it with you, and you can either comment on it or not, is that you can create physical objects with sound. And depending on the frequency of the sound and the shape of the container, let's say if you have sand or some kind of material that's a liquid, you could create a shape. And I believe that if the frequency was right and high enough, that the sound itself could make metal into this coil.
Sure. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Sound can do anything. It's the ultimate power. What we say is, you know, when people talk about black holes, and this is a question that so many people cringed when I have asked them, you know, but it's simple. question, which is, a black hole supposedly becomes so dense that light can't even escape it because the escape velocity is too high. And so light can't even, hence it's called a black hole. What I ask people all the time is, well, when matter is that dense, okay, sound and light have the opposite quality, okay? Traditionally, it's thought the fastest thing in the universe is light moving through the vacuum of space. But we have proposed a different way of looking at it, which is that the fastest thing moving through the universe is actually sound penetrating matter near the core of a black hole. Because light travels slower the denser the medium, right? So
sure.
Space is traveling fast at its fastest. When it's penetrating various mediums, it's traveling slower, and the denser the medium gets, you have to get even really concentrated light, like lasers, to burn through it. With sound, it's completely the reverse. Sound supposedly doesn't travel in space at all. The denser the matter, the faster the sound travels. So projecting sound through the earth, I'm sure you know, is much faster because the atoms are closer together.
I will also share with you that one of the papers that Helen Schuckman wrote after she channeled A Course in Miracles was a paper called Notes on Sound. And in that paper, they say that the key to all healing is via sound. I thought that was an interesting thing to come through a paper that described healing processes. And in the paper, they even describe how to build this device that aided in the healing process using sound.
Yeah. Well, sound, it is. It's the source of everything. It is the source of, when you mentioned form before, how you can vibrate or create a sound that creates something. Yeah, and it's very complex, I believe. I mean, the human body essentially is a musical instrument. And you have two different aspects of science. You've got matter, which can be a wave, it can be a particle, both of which are modeled inside of our equation. And the other aspect of reality you have are what are known as fields. I believe that consciousness is ultimately the source field, as, David might call it. So when you look at these two aspects, you start to realize that there's so much in the material, despite the materials philosophy that's being touted around in much of modern science. The predictability, using the genome is something like 5% success rate. It's really low.
That reminds me, what is your preferred musical instrument?
I like to sing, actually, but I play piano. I'm sort of a jack of all trades in the instrument world, but I kind of write and compose. Mm-hmm. But I'm a singer in the bands I played in, and a songwriter. But everything physical is a musical instrument of sorts. But where the form comes from is very mysterious. For instance, we have like a table, and you can analyze the chemistry of the table, and you can break it all down into its atoms and molecules and quarks and Higgs bosons and whatnot. But none of that is ever going to explain to you the form of the table, which is something like an idea.
I didn't think that this show would ever cross over into the path of my spiritual teaching, but I will share something with you from the Course that you may or may not know about. Are you familiar with any of the teachings of the Course?
Not in detail.
Okay. Well, the Course basically says that everything is illusion. Everything that we see with our body's eyes, all physical matter, actually does not exist. It's an idea, and the only reason it has physical form is because of our judgment upon it. In other words, we collapse infinite potential into matter by our observing it, by our judging it, by our thinking about it. How does that resonate with you?
I definitely can say that I agree with that notion. Everything is from a certain perspective, I think, and as human beings, we get into a lot of linguistic and ideological contradictions often because it's hard to draw the line between our divine or higher self and our human self, which is relatively flawed, maybe not ultimately flawed, but anyway, we experience it as if we're flawed.
But isn't that a judgment about yourself, though?
It is in many ways, but, it's also something you have to be careful of because we can always be wrong. So I think there's a necessary part of our human self that has to maintain humility, even though the divine side of ourselves is ultimately all-knowing and creative and even demanding. it can be a very fine line as to how we relate to each other and talking about that. But essentially, yes, what you're saying, I think that some people get caught up in the create your own reality thing in a way that is not entirely accurate. It's just my take on it, because I really believe we're in something that it's kind of a feedback. It is greater than and equal to us. I guess that would be the mathematical way to say it.
That's a very good way to put it. And I would have to agree with you also.
That we are God and God's created everything.
Right.
But there's definitely an intelligence, I believe, at play that we're not fully conscious of on a day-to-day basis. We're partially conscious of it. We're perhaps becoming more conscious of it, but I don't believe we have attained the 100% potential of what the human being, the human body, the human genetics is really all about.
Mm-hmm.
Teaching in the scriptures is that the human being has written within them the scriptures of every other being in the entire universe, so that the entire universe is folded within us. And Baha'u'llah made statements, in the early 1800s, such as split the heart of the atom and within it you'll find a sun. Very profound statements like that. So the idea is that every other creature, be it an alien from a distant planet or the animals on our own planet, that all those forms of life are scripted within us, and that the human being contains all the realities of God within us. So that's our true source and potential, I believe. And I believe really that the ultimate technology really isn't some external coil or anything. I believe that the human body is the ultimate coil, far more sophisticated than anything that we'll ever invent. We simply don't understand exactly how to completely tap into its potentials. But I believe that ultimately every technology is simply an externalization of ourselves, and that if we truly realize 100% potential of the brain, which I believe can be done using sound and other techniques, then we will essentially evolve or ascend to another level, which is, I think, where we're born, which is where we detach from our mother, the earth, and we're born into a larger community of the universe. I think that we're still sort of in a fetal state here. We require the food and nourishment of the mother. Gravitationally, we're attached to her, and we love her. But in many ways, the outer realm of the father, I guess, in some senses, is very terrifying and fantastic. But we realize that we have to detach and explore that larger universe. That's just what life is about. So I believe that what we're doing with this discovery is very much playing a role in it. Whether or not we somehow come to some understanding of it now that is complete, or if it happens years from now, it doesn't really matter. I know that it's being guided in a very powerful way, and I've gone out there and done battle with the best of the best, the people that I consider to be the smartest people in the world. The institutions would tell you many of them are, and I've always been able to hold my own ground. And so I'm still continuing along until we see this idea through all the way. We're either going to prove it right or wrong, and I'm definitely committed to seeing it through.
Well, I am too, and I'm really excited that you're on the forefront of this mathematics and the coil design and everything else about this entire process. Would you speculate with me just for a moment? We're just going to play as if, okay, we've got the coil figured out, we've got the math figured out, we've now built a device that produces all of the energy we could ever hope to have. And it fits in a shoebox, and everybody has them in our home. What do you think the impact on society would be with that much energy available to the planet?
It's not even about the planet at that point. We've transcended the planet at that point, and there is no civilization. There are only people and the universe, and the kingdom is God's, and that's what the scriptures say, So there really is no, that's why it's scary to people, because there is no law at that point except God's law, but not in some crazy medieval sense, in a sense of freedom being the supreme principle. And because everybody is empowered with the ultimate, we are all self-contained. And I just believe that that protects itself. You don't have Kim Jong-il's and Saddam Hussein's and, Idi Amin's in a planet with, or in a galactic civilization with that kind of intelligence and energy at its fingertips, because no one will support them. No one goes along with the crazy guy's idea except when they're desperate and uneducated.
But I would argue, I'm going to play devil's advocate, that there are a lot of uneducated people in the world today. What would happen if this technology were to be given to countries that just didn't know any better? Let's take, for instance, a classic example would be the different religions that, let's say there's some religions that are bent out to kill another group of people, or some countries, United States and, let's say, North Korea, whatever. Are we ready for infinite energy? Are we ready for everybody to have an unlimited amount of power on this planet?
No, I don't think you can be ready for it. Some things just present themselves and have to be dealt with. I think that I understand the point that you're making, and I think it's a good point, and I think that's why we still have politics in the world. And I'm not denying any information about political corruption per se, but I'm also, I believe that there are a lot of good people at work inside the system as well who are dealing with real issues like what you're talking about. And they are real issues. And ultimately, my opinion on that, my speculation is that it's going to involve intervention from outside the planet. And that is really the defining moment in civilization. There's only two options in my view. Either we're going to experience some kind of incredibly profound internal evolution where all of that just disappears overnight because we all become enlightened and realize that we are just this one being, and this universe is our playground. I have experienced that consciousness, and I know that that consciousness is our ultimate destiny. But the only other way for me to look at it is that we will make contact with another civilization in a very public way, and that the world will be forced to change. I don't see any other thing that could happen that would make everyone just stop in their tracks and realize that they don't know everything.
I see what you're saying. I do think that there's a lot of ingrained beliefs, though, in the world that would have to be changed. And I would imagine that there are some people who would be willing to die for their beliefs. In other words, they want to be right so much they are not willing to be wrong at any cost. And because of that, they could be willing to push the button.
Could be, but maybe the button will be so obsoleted by the technology that we're presented with that it will be a dud,
I sure hope so. And this leads very nicely into the next question. Are you familiar with Stan Tenon's work at the Meru Project?
I know who Stan Tenon is. I don't believe he knows who I am, though I believe that he and Marco know each other or have interacted at some point in history. And I've only seen the little bit that's out there on the internet. I've never gotten deeply into his work. I do know that he put together this puzzle out of the first verse of the Hebrew Bible and found this torus shape embedded within it, and I don't doubt the accuracy of that discovery. What is a great thing about his work, in terms of my work, is that the shape that he discovered models exactly the type of shape that my ABHA models that I developed are revealing. So it's much more of a correlation between what he discovered and what I discovered than the traditional Rodent coil.
Isn't it interesting, though, that given his faith and your faith are almost on opposite sides of the fence, yet they're both finding the same truth?
Sure. Well, there are people in the world who would like them all to believe that they're on opposite sides of the fence, but the truth is they're really the same people. It's all kind of a hoax that's being pulled on them. But I believe the message is written into many, many faiths. I found the same message encoded in faiths from all over the world. in the studies that I've done, because that was a big part of my life in studying that. But for me, I'm not really I'm not officially a Baha'i, or I don't really attend any Baha'i functions or anything. I'm very profoundly influenced by the writings of Baha'u'llah, and I am a believer in what he was talking about. But the religion aspect, I don't feel like really applies to me so much in that respect. I do practice the intonation of the Most Great Name, and I do believe in its veracity and its validity in every way. But I just sort of have my own way of seeing things, and I've just never been able to do much more than to listen to what my best logic and best intentions lead me towards.
What's the next logical step for your discoveries and your plans for this math?
Well, right now I'm in the process of working on a film project. It's going to be produced by TBLN Films, and I'm working with several people on that who are going to really help us get the project out there, and some good connections that we've been able to develop. And Jose Escamilla is working with us too, which is really cool. You're probably familiar with him from Coast to Coast and his various films on the moon and everything on the UFO topic. And so our goal is to get this film out. We'd like to see it get in Sundance, and we think we know some people that can help us make that step. I'm in a bit of a controversy right now because just in the last week, even though my TED Talk was done over 2 years ago, TED has decided to censor my talk and remove it from YouTube. The main video that had over 100,000 views, the second main video has about 70 or 80,000 views right now. So when you look at all the different versions of my video, my TED Talk was rivaling Bill Gates' TED Talk for views. So they at first censored me without any explanation. No one has still talked to me at all. I've only been able to talk to people secondarily. I'm supposed to be getting a conference call, and I'm going to ask for due process. I'm going to say that I respect their authority, but I want due process, and I want the scientists who are criticizing me to provide a laboratory and to analyze our devices and to analyze the mathematics. And I want for them to properly analyze the peer review that we've had from very qualified people in mathematics and in physics, like Russell Blake, who was the head guy from Microsoft, who translated our math into these crazy complex matrix algebra academic math and showed how all this complicated stuff they were doing is just done by these simple patterns that we've tapped into in our kind of kids math. And so we have a lot of things. You know, my TED Talk was 8 minutes long. I was instructed to share the ultimate extreme of my big idea and to not worry about the peer review and all that. So I went out there and went out on a limb to stir up the way that people are thinking, to make people ask questions, to engender a dialogue. I feel like the talk ended up kind of polarizing a lot of people. People either really love it or hate it. So the other thing I'm going to ask TED for is that if they're asking me for a rigorous academic style talk, then I would be willing to give one if they give me the forum for it. I'll give a very controlled statement of facts. They tried to come at me with different things. They tried to say I violated their editorial guidelines. It turned out they don't even have any editorial guidelines. They were just making that up. No one was ever even presented with any, and then they ended up having to say, well, it's just an unwritten thing.
You know, it could be that you are running into the most dangerous device power structure.
Well, I could be, but I think a lot of them genuinely think I'm a nutcase. This project is so far out of left field for most people. It's ridiculous to them. They just can't handle this kind of an idea. So there are people who think that I'm onto something, but I've talked to people within major corporations. But to them, I'm not a threat because I'm not actually building anything and I don't have any funding. All I'm doing is out there sharing my crazy ideas. So they do better to just discredit me. And they're doing a decent job of it, I guess, But I think even within those circles, a lot of people want to see this happen. They're just scared of the change. No one knows how to make that move, And a lot of them who are probably holding it back are probably honest people too, who are just scared, and just like with a lot of the questions that you were asking before.
But isn't it very hard to argue with numbers? I mean, come on, it's math.
Well, it is, but there's a lot of number theory behind numbers. What we're doing is stabbing right into the heart of number theory, because we're claiming that numbers are not arbitrary conventions created by mankind, that numbers are real, that there is actually one true, perfect, Vortex-Based system, and that's the base 10 or modular 9 system. And I've gone deeply into working with prime numbers to actually prove that point and show how the base 10 is the only truly perfect toroidal system of information, because it has no redundancy, nothing is omitted, and every single property of physics or science that we seem to throw at it is very easily absorbed and explainable and understandable. And so, have I taken that to the level of predicting subatomic particles in a cyclotron? No, I mean, that's not my area of expertise, and I'm not trying to take away from what science has discovered through its analytical methods. I'm simply trying to suggest a unification of that, and I don't have to require, because of my TED Talk's going to be censored, but Brian Greene from Columbia University, who is a nice guy, seems to be, and I respect him a lot. He's a brilliant man, and he's one of the lead proponents of string theory. But string theory has no confirmational data whatsoever experimentally. It's entirely a mathematical speculation, and it's a mathematical speculation that no one can understand because it's postulating things that we cannot conceive of, which to me is inherently irrational. Mm-hmm. So instead, what I'm trying to do is propose a model that actually models what we're actually experiencing, not something that is inconceivable. So I feel like if he can share his ideas, I should be able to share my ideas. And ironically, I read his book, and in the end of it, they come to this conclusion that every point in space is a torus, which is exactly what I've been saying at the very beginning. So I realized, we're actually coming to the same conclusions. All roads are leading to Rome. It's simply a matter of trying to find the easiest way. And maybe this is just one aspect of that approach, but so far we've only seen positive results. And Daniel and various people working on this are continuing to divide the odds. I mean, they're showing monopole magnets where the entire coil will only read as a south pole. All these things that are supposed to be impossible. I believe that the torus goes much deeper, though, than the technology, like I said before. And I believe it actually is our spiritual body that we can travel the universe in, that we can ascend to a completely different reality by understanding and by harnessing it through sound. And sound really is the source of everything. It is the true key to unlimited energy. And that's why it's venerated by every religion and every people. And that's why shamans can't even conceive of shamanic journeying without singing. The concept doesn't even apparently exist. So there's something there that's innate to us and who we are.
Well, sound's certainly been an important part of my life. I mean, it's permeated every part of my existence. I make my living with it. I play music. I listen to music. Of course, we all communicate verbally that way.
And we know that music scales are following the mathematics that we're proposing. Scales are doubling. Mm-hmm. And that's what it's based off of. And there's been a lot of people who've done profound research into the musical aspects of this and how it relates to scales and harmonics and all of that. And it's all very important because I think, when you're a musician, that there's really a sound there. There is some kind of true structure behind it. It's not just arbitrary.
It is truly a key to, or a window into a higher plane of existence, I believe.
And I believe underneath everything that we're doing, even underneath our logic and our language, are sounds and harmonics and songs. And that really the language of the higher mind is song. It is communication in very dense packets of information that are communicated through harmonics.
How can people contact you, Randy, if they want to learn more about your work?
People can email me. My email is the ABHA Kingdom. That's TheAbha Kingdom @gmail.com. So people can email me there, or you can Skype me at Randy VBM, as in Vortex-Based Mathematics. So Randy VBM is my Skype, and anybody is free to contact me. I'm in touch with a lot of people, so sometimes I get overwhelmed and can't respond to everybody right away, but I really have tried to keep everything on a personal level. I try to meet each person individually, and people who are really interested and involved, we try to get them going. Of course, we're still not at that level with the funding, but we hope with this film, we're going to take this project out to the public, and we're going to make the public demand that we research this idea and that we explore this knowledge. And if we come together, we can all do it together. We don't have to have some kind of crazy corporation or some kind of private thing where we have a bunch of people with big salaries. But if we can at least generate the funds to take care of the people who are doing the work, just like Buckminster Fuller said, we waste all our time with everybody with this ridiculous notion of everybody trying to make a living. Really, the reality is that one person in 10,000, if not 100,000, could make a technological advancement that would give us all absolute leisure and ability to pursue whatever it is that we loved and wanted to pursue. And that's what I believe the future of life is about. As my mom always said, life is about enjoying yourself. In a very profound sense, that's true.
I agree. Thank you so much for your time, Randy. This has been very enjoyable and a couple surprises for me. I appreciate those surprises.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I appreciate your work and everything you're doing. I hope that it helps, and I would love to follow up.
Well, I'd love to meet you in person sometime. Like I said, I'm coming to North Carolina in October. We're going to ride the Blue Ridge Parkway. I don't know how far you are from the Parkway.
I'm not far at all, really. I'm only about 2 hours from Boone, or 3 from Asheville, 2.5, 3 from Asheville. So both of those are within my range, and I always love to go down there for a trip. Sometimes my wife and I just go down for the day, so maybe I can cross paths with you there, or if you wanted to ever come up this way towards Charlotte. There's a lot of interesting things happening here. We're having the Democratic National Convention here, I guess, in the next couple weeks.
Okay, I did not know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting. Charlotte, ironically, has been, Obama has said that is going to be, the new energy capital. Siemens moved all their stuff here. There's all this strange energy stuff going on in Charlotte. So maybe it's prophetic in some kind of way. In fact, the talk that Obama gave that I responded to in my TED Talk was a talk that he gave in Charlotte. And, I don't have a television. I never would have ever even seen that, except my parents happened to be here getting a car, and I had to take them to the car dealership. And I was sitting in the lobby in the car dealership, and I heard that quote that he gave. And it just struck me as a quote that I wished I could have responded to. And so I got my chance at the TED conference.
Well, there are no accidents, so that was obviously something that was meant to happen.
Absolutely.
All right, Randy, thank you again, and I look forward to meeting you in person sometime.
Well, thank you so much, and stay in touch, and be well.
Thank you for listening to the Most Dangerous Device radio show. Until the next time, keep an open mind. Let the light shine in.